My name is Hai Nguyen. I'm co-founder of Affluence, the company behind Matrix. Today's webinar is on mastering your work-life balance and how to set and prioritize both your personal and professional goals using Matrix. I'm going to make some basic assumptions that you know a little bit about Matrix, but I'll still show you some basic capabilities that I think are actually very helpful in helping you prioritize and set goals. Couple of goals for today. One, help you understand the importance of work-life balance, understand the principles and benefits of the Eisenhower matrix, how to use Matrix to set these personal and professional goals, and then how to use Matrix to achieve those goals. I'll also be sharing some best practices that I have accumulated over the years talking to thousands of customers. So first, let's start with the importance of work-life balance. I think this is actually a really interesting topic because it's something that, for me, I struggle with constantly. So what happens when you lose this sense of work-life balance is that you end up getting stress or the feeling that you're actually not moving forward despite all the work that you do. And then at the same time, the lack of fulfillment. So the benefits of the work-life balance then is actually that improved sense of fulfillment, better relationships, and achieving your goals. So at the end of the day, when we talk about Matrix, we talk about our software. All that matters is that you accomplish whatever it is that you want to accomplish, right? So people use Matrix in so many different ways, but what happens is that I want you to walk away with a sense of how Matrix can benefit you at this very moment. And so if there's any questions you have around that, definitely bring them up and I'd be happy to address those. But I will show you the tricks that I have implemented to make myself more productive. One of the biggest myths that I've seen over and over again around work-life balance is that people think work-life balance means doing less work. And I think that's not the case at all. From my own personal experience, work-life balance is really around working on the most meaningful things at at the right time. And so what's really interesting is that, if you're able to commit to whatever it is that you do, and let's say during the work hours, you work harder than ever before and you're doing more than ever before. But then when you're not working, and in your personal time, you're committed to that 100% and you're not thinking about work, that's the magic. And so for me personally, I have so many things on my plate. I try my best to actually differentiate them. And so I'm able to work on the right things at the right time. So what is Matrix? Matrix is a comprehensive email priority and project management software that helps individual prioritize your most important tasks and emails, help teams stay aligned on key projects, and then at the organizational level, creates a single source of truth to help you become more efficient and more effective. What happens with Matrix is that it creates this one central place where it's very tangible for you to see what it is that you need to work on, and what it is that you should not work on. And so if you use Matrix correctly, you'll see both of those. So what makes Matrix very effective are the following. First, we're the only software that's Microsoft 365 security certified for Teams, Outlook, and web app at the same time. And we're deeply integrated into the Microsoft ecosystem. So if you do end up using Microsoft Teams, Outlook, or anything on the Microsoft side, our solution is no brainer. Now, Matrix works completely outside of Teams as well. You don't have to have anything that's related to Microsoft to use our system. But if you do use Microsoft Teams and all that, then make sure that you install those add-ins. And then Matrix focuses on prioritizations, hence the name of our product. One of the things that I think is the most important takeaway from using our software is not necessary to plan out the things you have to do, but just so then you can communicate to yourself and to others what it is that you need to work on at any point in time. Matrix also provide what I call people-centric collaboration. And this is pretty useful when you're looking at a team environment and trying to understand what is it that you need to do for another person. And then Matrix is available as a standard SaaS solution, but we also have a HIPAA compliant solution for healthcare and life sciences, as well as an Azure government cloud solution for state and local government. And then one of the last things that we're working on and we're investing a lot of effort on is actually creating AI features that actually are beneficial to you. I think AI can be used in many different ways, but what we're trying to do with AI is actually to go and help you achieve your specific goals and simplify things wherever possible. Let's start with the fundamentals behind Protomatrix. There's a famous quote attributed to former President Eisenhower: "What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important." Now, what I really like about this quote is that it helps us understand that the things that are always pulling us, that pulling us away from whatever moment that we're in, those are the things that are urgent, and most of the time they're not important. And so instead of looking at a to-do list, instead what you want to look at is the two dimensions of importance and urgency. So when you have a task, you don't just say, do I need to do this now? You should also ask, do I need to do this task at all? And that's the difference, right? Doing it now means it's urgent, but doing it at all means it's important. So if we look from that perspective, instead of having a list with all the tasks in it, we have what's called the Eisenhower matrix. It's a very simple, powerful time management framework that categorizes things into four quadrants, four buckets: the dimensions of importance and urgency. So what that means is you have the things that are important and urgent, the things that are important and not urgent, the things that are urgent but not important, and then the things that are not important and not urgent. Now, obviously, this can be implemented in so many different ways. I mean, I think if you end up using Protomatrix, obviously Protomatrix is designed to handle this methodology, but the reality is you can do this on pen and paper. I've talked to customers who, ran up to me at a conference and literally show me his piece of paper and says, I've been doing this for 10 years on pen and paper. And Protomatrix fundamentally changes how he can work with his data. And then thirdly, the Eisenhower matrix helps you prioritize your task and make the most out of your time. One of the things that I think is extremely important that people don't recognize enough is that doing good work is just as important around determining what to work on as determining what not to work on. And so hopefully, as you use Protomatrix, you're getting both sides. So how does it work with Protomatrix? Instead of actually having a to-do list or a task list in Protomatrix, we use the Eisenhower matrix and we adapt it to our software. And so now on the top left, you have the do now quadrants, right? These are the things you need to work on. Again, those are the things that are important and urgent. And then the things that you start planning for are the things that are important but not urgent. And then the things that are not important but urgent, perhaps you could delegate to somebody else. If it's someone else's job, maybe they can do a better job at it than you, or they're just more specialized at it, right? And then lastly, you should not have anything that's not important and not urgent. Being able to cross those things out is just so valuable. So instead, in quadrant 4, it should be your inbox. This is where you put things down if you haven't decided where they fit within the bigger picture, and then from there determine if they fit in quadrant 1, 2, or 3, or just get rid of them completely. So when you use Promatrix, we force you to prioritize using this methodology, and it is hard. It is not easy, and that's one of the things that I can't emphasize enough. Protomatrix isn't about doing the easiest thing. It's about making sure that you do the most effective things. So I want you to use Protomatrix in a way where you feel like you're making tough decisions. The second way to adapt Protomatrix is to actually use it for goals. And so I talk about how in this webinar, we're talking about setting both personal and professional goals as part of our work-life balance. One of the things I use Protomatrix for is to set my long-term goals, my short-term goals, and then also my anti-goals. These are things that I actually don't want to do because they do harm me from meeting the short-term and the long-term goals. And one of the challenges that I think a lot of people face, and myself included, is actually remembering our goals and making sure that we focus on it. So there's a couple of tips and tricks that I'll show you on how to actually ensure that you'll work on those goals that you've set. And then from a personal level, for me, it's so beneficial to be able to be reminded of what truly matters and then constantly reiterating and constantly shifting my priorities to make sure that I meet these goals. And so as you can see with Protomatrix, it is very, very customizable. I've shown you two different ways to use our software in terms of the quadrants, but you can actually use Protomatrix literally 1,000 other ways. So a couple of side note on goal setting, just in case you're not familiar with this yet, but this applies to setting goals more broadly than just our software. But just make sure that you set what's called SMART goals, right? That means they're specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, relevant, and time bound. So regardless of what software you use, making sure that you set these kind of goals is actually very helpful. And then I like to differentiate between the long-term goals and short-term goals. And so, as you can tell, the way it works as part of Matrix is that we have all these different dimensions, right? So importance and urgency. So what that means is you have a time dimensions and then another dimension. So what that means is that when you adapt it to other matrices, you can think about the exact same way. So then you can have goals that are important goals or personal goals in short term or personal goals and long term, etc. And then always remind yourself on why you set up the longer term goals and then use anti goals to set boundaries. We all have too many things to do, so many things on our plates. If we don't set boundaries, we will be pulled away to work on things that are actually not that important. So a couple of ideas and tips as you use Matrix. If everything is important and urgent, then nothing is important and urgent. And I can't emphasize this enough. This is particularly important for managers. If you go to your employees and you're like, hey, we got to do this right now, drop everything and do this. And then 5 minutes later, you do the exact same thing again. Well, guess what? What you're just doing there is you're firefighting. You're not planning for the future. And so when you use Party Matrix, if everything you have is in quadrant one, you're doing it wrong. You have to make that conscious decision on deprioritizing things. And so similarly, imagine if you're trying to work and your manager is coming constantly and telling you to do all these things. And so that's the problem we've seen over and over again with a standard communication tool like a chat software, right? If you use Microsoft Teams or Slack and you're sending messages back and forth, guess what? It's always urgent. There's always just something that's new, and you're actually spending time looking at those things as opposed to the important things. And so, if you get task delegation via text messages or people walk into your office, it's so important that you go and make sure that you take out those things that are actually not relevant towards your actual goals. And then regularly review and update your task categorization. So with Protomatrix, it's very visual and it's very easy to see, but it requires maintenance. So what happens is you have to go and look at their task and determine, okay, this is what I need to work on, this is what I shouldn't work on. And try to identify and eliminate time wasters. This is a very important skill. It requires us to actually be very cognizant about what it is that we want to do and what it is that we don't want to do. And the corollary to that is learn to say no to a lot more tasks. And so, not every email has to be responded to. Not every task has to be done. If someone asks you to do something and you already have so much on your plate, respond back and say, hey, I'm more than happy to do this. Which of these other things do you want to drop? And then breaking tasks into smaller, manageable steps, and then use time blocking to allocate specific time slots for different tasks, and then regularly reassess and adjust your strategies. Now, a lot of these things here is pretty applicable regardless of what system you use to prioritize. So the 4-quadrant Eisenhower matrix create alignment for your team because it forces you to prioritize from the very beginning. And when it comes to goals, success from using Matrix is about identifying what you need to work on every day and identifying what you should not work on every day. So one of the things I want to, an analogy that I really like is imagine taking a piece of paper and write down all the things you wanted to do, or you have to do rather, and then put it into the 4 quadrants, right? So now you have your goals. And so you have your priorities. So these are the things that's important and urgent to me. These are the things that are important but not urgent to me. And then do that. And then ask your coworkers to do the exact same exercise. Then walk around the office and start comparing notes. So imagine if you go to your manager and you show him or her your piece of paper with the quadrants on it and say, hey, by the way, these are my priorities. Do you agree or do you disagree? And then take a look at their priorities and see if it matches. And the reality is, 80, 90% of the time, all those priorities match. The most important things match. But once in a while, there's discrepancy. And that's where the magic happens. A lot of times, we have this sense of what we think is important, but we don't make it explicit. And therefore, we try to imply that something's important, but not everyone's on the same page. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is to be explicit in prioritization. And that's what makes Party Matrix so effective, is because it forces you to be explicit in your priorities, and then each of your coworkers are explicit in their priorities. And when you come together to compare notes, there is no lack of clarity, for lack of better words. Okay, I do want to emphasize that the webinars are recorded, and there's a lot of other webinars on our website that's there that covers other topics, including the basics of Party Matrix and so forth. And so with that, what I'd like to do now is actually walk you through the product and show you how to put this into practice. All right. So now I'm going to open up my Party Matrix. So you should be able to see my screen here. I have my Party Matrix on the web. And what happens, let me walk you through the structure of Party Matrix. On the left-hand side are my projects. So you can think of projects as essentially buckets or categories of quadrants, right? So for example, here I have my personal priorities. And so within this project, I have the 4 quadrants: do now, do later, delegate, inbox. And within that, I have all my tasks. But what happens is I might be working on other initiatives, or I might be working on different projects. So let me give you a couple of examples of what a project might be. You might have a project for your personal goals. You might have a project for your team priorities. So then everyone who's on your team knows exactly what everyone's priorities are. If you are in sales, you might have a project for each of your enterprise customers that you're trying to close. Or if you're in product management, then each of your project might represent a product line that you're working on. And so projects are actually very, very flexible in terms of its terminology and what it entails. It's just that within each project, you have the 4 quadrants. So if you're a site manager and you manage, 10 different plants, then have a project for each of those plants. The reason is, when you go to those plants, then you can see the priorities for each of those plants, and then you know exactly what it is that you need to work on. So that's my general recommendation. Don't be afraid of creating more projects. So in my work account, I have more than 300 projects, covering almost every single things that I work on. It doesn't mean that I actually touch all of those, but it gives me a sense of everything that's happening within the scope of my work. Okay, so that's a list of projects here. And then what I also have is I have what's called star projects. So these are at the top of my list. These are the projects I care about, and these are the projects that are most important. And then within each project are the 4 quadrants. So you can see how I have these tasks here that I can create within each of the quadrants. And let me give you an example. So let's just say I might have to do a task, which is follow up with webinar participants. Okay, so this is something that I certainly have to do after this call. And then I'm going to go ahead and say due tomorrow at 2 p.m. And so this is an example of a task that I can create in Party Matrix. And so when I click add here, what happens is it creates a task, but Party Matrix uses natural language to interpret that due date for me. So then it will actually set the due date in my local time. So if you're on a different time zone, it'll set it to your time zone. And now the task is created, the date is set, and I could easily have said due in 2 weeks or due in 5 hours, etc. Now that I created the task, on the right-hand side is actually my item details, right? And so this is where I have the item name, and then I have the owner. So in this case, I created the task, so the owner is me, but I can go and actually delegate this to another person. And then after that, I can actually set due dates and reminders. One of the things I want to emphasize right now is how important it is to use due dates and reminders in Party Matrix. And the reason is the following. If you want to be effective at understanding what tasks are important and urgent, then you need the dimension of time. And so therefore, even just putting a due date to something helps you put it within the perspective of everything else that you have to do. I mean, we don't have infinite time. We don't have infinite resources. Whatever it is that we work on will consume some time. And therefore, what I like to do is for every task that's important, I set a due date. Now, there's a difference between due dates and reminders. And let me give you an example. Let's just say if you're working on a really critical project or a really critical task, and that task will take you 5 days of work to do. and you set a due date due in 2 weeks. Now, when that 2 weeks come, and if you haven't started yet on that project, guess what? You're not going to get that done. You can't do 5 days of work in one day. And therefore, what you want to do is you want to set reminders ahead of time to keep it top of mind so then you know to get started. Right now, that's a big difference between just saying that, you set a due date and a start date, because that puts on your calendar, but still there's no reminders that's actually telling you that you need to work on. So what I like to do down here is I'll just type this out, remind me daily. So now I've just created a task in quadrant 4. I've set the due date, and now I've set a daily recurring reminder. And the reason why reminders are so powerful and important is because it helps us overcome that urgent mindset. Let me explain. What happens is that every single day we're getting bombarded with new things, right? So for example, emails. Every day I get dozens of new emails in the morning, and guess what? It's the last email in that's the first email that I look at, and I'll try to respond to those and so forth. Is that the most important email? Unlikely. Same thing with tasks. Your managers, your coworkers, your clients, your customers will send you tasks and ask you to do things, but it's the last thing that they ask that ends up being the first thing that you end up looking at or responding to. It's not the most important. And then at the same time, if you don't get it done, guess what? Whoever goes and respond to that and circle and get back to you again and again and again, they're the people that's going to get a response, right? And so when someone is loud with respect to how many times they ask you to do something or the frequency in which this get brought up, that creates this false sense of importance. And so similarly within Party Matrix, we try to capitalize on that. And so then for all your most important tasks, you can set a due date, but set those recurring reminders so then it competes with all these other urgent things that you have. And so now on a daily basis, my most important task will get a daily reminders. So then I know, oh, hey, this is something that's important, and I know it's important, and I'm getting this daily reminders to make sure that it doesn't get crowded out by all these other urgent tasks. It's a very, very simple process. I understand that, not everyone will end up using it, but I strongly encourage you to do so. So, if you go into Party Matrix and you just create 10 tasks, 10 of your most important tasks, set the due date, set those recurring reminders, and I guarantee you that it'll make you feel so much better to get it out of your brain, and then knowing that there'll be notifications and reminders for you to work on that. So that's one of the most important features in Party Matrix in terms of balancing all these things that are coming at you. Now, within the item details, there's a lot of other things you can do. One of the things you can do is you can star a task. That's similar to starring a project. Starring a task means it's at the very top of your list within each quadrant. And then you can click on the add icon here and add an icon to it. So for example, I've seen customers use red, yellow, and green as a way to say, hey, this thing's on schedule, this thing's behind schedule. But maybe for your personal task, maybe something's related to travel, so you can choose that, or related to something else, to home or something like that. So that's a way to add the icon. It's visual, and you can sort it and organize it that way. Now, in the bottom here of the item details, you have that chat, which is where I send those messages earlier. But it also serves as a place of communication. So what that means is that if you're working with a coworker, they can respond to this, and you can both have conversation back and forth within the context of this task, which is very, very important. So when we think about, a conversation we have with a coworker, let me give you an example. Let's just say, you're standing in the hallway and you're talking about a very, very important task, and you come up with a bunch of great ideas, and you come up with a bunch of tasks that you want to do. You both go back to the office, and then, of course, you got new emails, new tasks, and then you forget to write down all those things. 2 weeks later, you reconvene and you're like, wait a minute, did we write down those things? Or what was it that we said? Guess what? You've forgotten all of it, right? Because you're no longer thinking about that, and it's no longer within context. The difference between a contextual conversation in a chat here is that you have all that information related to this task. And again, it's very simple, but it's the equivalent of an email thread. There's a reason why you have an email thread as opposed to constantly creating new emails. But one of the most powerful things about this this chat section is the ability for you to assign a task to a different person, and they'll get the full historical conversation, and they can actually have a good understanding of exactly everything that's been discussed, and the timestamp of all the changes in priorities, or change in quadrants or due dates, etc. So that's very, very useful. Then next to that, you have the notes section. This is where you can create subtasks and add notes related to the task itself. And then next to that, you have the resources section where you can upload files, emails, links, images that's relevant to the task. Okay, so that's item details. That's the quadrant. And this is the list of projects. So now let's talk about personal goals, or actually how to create goals in Protomatrix, and some of the tips that I would like to give you. So one of the things I would like you to do is create a project called Goals for 2024. The way you do that is you click on project, then create project. And then here you can choose a blank project. So I'm going to go ahead and create a project here. I already have a project called Goals for 2024. So I'm going to go ahead and call it Goals for Q3 2024. Okay. And go ahead and create that project here. And then I'm going to choose a color and then click Add Project. So when I create a project like that, now the project is selected. In the middle is the 4 quadrants. Again, it chooses the color coding for me. I like color coding as a way to categorize different types of projects. So sometimes, you might want to use orange projects for all your personal, and then green projects for all your work or different departments, etc. So now we have a project Goals for Q3 2024. Now, a couple things I want to do. One, I want to customize this project. So when this project is selected, on the right-hand side is my project details. So here I have the do now, do later, delegate, postpone. I'm going to go ahead and change this to long-term goals, and then change this to short-term goals, and then change this to anti-goals, and then I'll change this to catch all. Okay. So now I've customized the 4 quadrants to reflect this project around goals for my quarter. So now let's start with creating something that I want to do. So for example, read a new business book monthly. Okay, so imagine this very, very simple task that I have within the goals that I have for this particular quarter. Now, here's the thing. Here's the reason why people never achieve their New Year goals, because they will go and have a goal like something like this. For example, at the beginning of the year, you go and you create a goal and you say, I'm going to read a new business book monthly. Guess what? You write that down. You're like, that's fantastic. I'm going to get started. The first month, it's still somewhat top of mind, right? The second month, you already have so many other things that's happening, you can start to forget it. And once in a while, you'll remember. By the third month, you haven't thought about this goal for a long time, and then that gets dropped off completely. And this happens to every single thing that we do. So one of the strategies that I employ, which I recommend that you do too, is when you create a project like this, create that goal, and then down here, say, remind me monthly. So now on a monthly basis, Protomatrix will send me a reminder to work on this goal. And that is a very, very simple strategy that you can use to make sure that you work on the goals that you need to work on. And so I recommend that you create one of these goals projects for yourself. Write down everything that you want to achieve this year, this quarter, whatever it is. And you could even go long term, as in 5 years out or whatever. And then just set these recurring reminders for every single one of your goals as a way to ensure that it becomes top of mind and it stays top of mind. Okay, so that's an example of a way for you to create a personal goal. And then afterwards, I'm going to go ahead and drag this up here. So now I've just reprioritize it. And then every once in a while, I will go and look at this and look at my goals and know what it is I need to work on. So one of the things I talked about is reminders. So how does it come in? If you go to the home section here, what happens is there's a section called alerts. In the alerts view, it tells you everything that's relevant to you. So what that means is that, these are items that you follow, as in tasks that maybe you assign to other people, or tasks that people assign to you, or tasks where due dates and reminders trigger. So whenever you go to the home view here, these are the items that require your attention. It's just like your inbox. And then as you click through each of these, it goes away. One of the things I like to do is that if I don't go through all of my alerts and I've scanned through it and I know, these are I've already tackled everything that's important, I like to go and clear all notifications. So for example, in this case, I'm gonna go ahead and clear everything older than a week. And now suddenly my list is smaller and I can actually just go through the things that's most important. And then what happens is that if I happen to forget one of those important tasks, guess what? I've set those recurring reminders. And so either the next day or the next week or the next month, it'll pop back up again. And then I'll see it on here and it triggers my memory. And then I know to work on it. So that's how you deal with setting goals and making sure that you work with them. One of the things you can do too in Matrix is actually go to what's called the agenda view. The agenda view takes everything that have due dates and actually show you the things you need to work on. So as we talk about the tasks that's on our list, we have both personal tasks as well as work tasks, right? And therefore, they span across all these different projects. So when you go to the home view and then to the agenda view, it shows you everything across all of your projects that are due either today or tomorrow or whatever it is over the next few days. So it's a very, very simple way to ensure that you work on things regardless of what project it belongs in. And if you go to this top right here, you can actually change to only items that you own, which means that have been delegated to you, or that you've created, or items that you follow, which means you're able to also see tasks that your coworkers are working on. So an example might be you're a manager, you have 5 or 10 direct reports, you assign a lot of tasks to different direct reports, and you want to know what are the things that's on their plate as well. Then when you go to this view and you choose items I follow, then you're able to see the tasks that they have that's coming up. One of the things I mentioned is around team prioritization and making sure that everyone's on the same page. Similar to how I created a goal for my 2024, one of the things I can do is I can actually create a project for team priorities. So in this particular case, as you can see, I choose team priorities. The quadrant names here are actually slightly different. And then on the right-hand side here, under members, you can see that I actually have other people in this project, and it's not just me. So what that means is that when my coworkers log into their Party Matrix, they'll see the exact same information in this project as I do. And that's how you create transparency, and that's how you keep everyone on the same page. Imagine this. You create a project called Team Priorities, and then within it, you write down all the priorities for each of your staff members. Then on a weekly basis, when you have your staff meeting, just project Party Matrix onto the big screen. And now suddenly everyone's on the same page. Everyone can see exactly what everyone's priorities are. Then you can focus on the things that are truly important. One of the biggest time wasters is actually having a meeting to talk about something that doesn't matter, right? And so what that means is that you shouldn't spend any time talking about the things that are in quadrant 4, for example. Instead, talk about the things that are in quadrant 1, and then a little bit of time talking about the things that are in quadrant 2, so you start planning for that. And what happens is that everyone will look at it, and then someone will say, wait a minute, this other task is much more important. Why isn't it in quadrant 1? Or the vice versa. This task is no longer important. We should get rid of it. And so you can see how you can actually make your meetings so much more effective. And so if you're a manager, I highly, highly recommend that particular step, which is to project Party Matrix onto the screen in your office or sharing the screen when you're in a meeting. And guess what? Your conversations will be far, far more effective because everyone's on the same page and you're not spending time talking about things that don't matter. So the way that you add team members, you just simply click on this plus here, you choose the appropriate team members, and now whoever's invited, they can accept the project and they'll see the same thing. They can make modifications to it. One of the things I like about this too is what I call asynchronous. You can actually know exactly what the priorities are asynchronously. So what that means is that you don't have to have a meeting to be on the same page. Anyone at any point in time can open up the team priorities project and see the priorities across their entire team. And then as you use Party Matrix more and you're creating different projects that covers your product line, your operations, your marketing, and so forth, you can actually get visibility into everything that's important at any point in time in real time without having unnecessary meetings. So I do want to emphasize how powerful that is. And here's the amazing thing that happens when everyone uses Matrix. So let's just say if you have a project and you have a lot of priorities in it, and then you go on a leave of absence, so either medical leave or you're out for the day, guess what? Someone else can come in to the project and look at your priorities, look at the things you're working on, look at the things that's due today, and know exactly what to take over, right? They don't have to ping you, they don't have to call you and panic around what are the things you worked on. But here's another magical thing about it, which is imagine if you have a salesperson and that salesperson is working on a very, very critical lead. And it's an enterprise customer. So there's a lot of tasks that's been opened. There's so many conversations. You need to know what are the things that's important to the customers and all that. Now that salesperson's leave. If they don't use Matrix and they wrote everything down in their emails or on a piece of paper, guess what? No one else can take over and know exactly what to do. And you have to restart the entire process. But instead, if that salesperson had used Matrix, someone else can literally take over the matrix, know exactly what the priorities are, can click on every single task and know the notes, and see the notes and the details and the history of all those changes. It is so, so powerful as a way to ensure that you have this organizational knowledge that's not lost. Now, you can say the same thing applies if you use any task management system, but the difference with Matrix is the 4 quadrants here. So being able to see what the person considered to be highest priority, important and urgent, and then, important but not urgent, that's the kind of information that gets lost real easily when you don't use something like Matrix. So keep that in mind as you think about how you want to implement Matrix. It's so powerful, especially if you're a manager. Okay, so what that means is that after today's calls, I recommend that you create that project for your goals, that project for your personal priorities, that project for your team priorities, and make sure that you invite the appropriate people. Now, let's talk about how to manage your personal tasks versus your work task. So as you can see, I have to click through these different projects and so forth to see the tasks I have for me personally, personal as in, maybe outside of work. But one of the things you can do in Matrix is actually look at what's called the global view. So on the left-hand side here, I have a lot of different global views. I can actually go to the calendar view, and this is a calendar view of all the tasks I have across all of my projects. And what I can do is actually I can click on this project here and then just choose the appropriate project, right? So of course I have a lot of projects here, but I can actually just select the project that matters. And so if you use Matrix on a personal level, you can go to here, just select your personal project, and now you see your calendar for your personal projects. Or if you use Matrix to track the tasks that you have to do for your clients, you can actually just choose that project and see all the things you have to do for that particular client across all of your projects. So that's an example of a global view. Another global view is the search view. If you click on the search view, this is what used to be called the master view. It shows you everything across all of your Matrix that you have access to, and give you whatever it is that you need to make, to decide what you need to work on. So when you go to this view, you can search for all your tasks and it shows up in this one list and you can actually sort it and all that. And what's nice about this is you can actually see things that are overdue because they'll turn red, and you can select them regardless of what project they're in. But you can actually go to the filter section here and then start selecting tasks that are assigned to specific people. So for example, let's just say if you're managing 5 or 10 people and you want to know what is so-and-so working on, right? What is Eugenia working on? And so I can actually go to this filter section in the search view and see exactly what Eugenia is working on across all of Matrix, all projects that you have access to. And then now you can see, okay, you know what? I see Eugenia has a lot of tasks that are overdue, or, a lot of these tasks haven't been touched in a while. And then I can go to reprioritize, or I can bring it up and have a conversation with her. So what happens with Matrix is that in the master view, you can gather all sorts of information that helps you make decisions. You can also see the tasks that Eugenia finished, right? And then you can also see the tasks that Eugenia finished in quadrant 1. And so by using the filter system in the master view, I can actually have full visibility on everything that's important across all of my coworkers and myself included, obviously. Um, and then not only that, you're able to include specific projects, exclude specific projects, and then find the items that are tagged in different ways. So I want to bring that up because when you use Protomatrix, you're going to find that you create so many different projects that cover so many different topics. But rest assured that Protomatrix gives you so many different ways to filter out that information so you get to what you need. And then once you've created something like this, you can print it out. So imagine if a use case here, let's just say you're doing your performance review, right? And now you want to find out, hey, what are all the things I worked on last quarter? Well, you can go to the master view, select the things you finished, select the time span, select the project that are appropriate, and then print that out or export that as a CSV or whatever, and you can use that to put into your performance reviews. So you get that really good visibility. Now, there's a couple of other views, but one thing I want to show you is actually what's called workload management. So as you use Protomatrix more, one thing you're going to find is that, for you personally, you can see the number of things you have on every single day. So when I go to workload management, I can actually see myself and I can see the number of tasks I have due on each of those days, and I can click on it and then change it or modify them and open them and do whatever it is that I need to do. But one thing that's useful here too is if you have to manage the workload of your coworkers, this view also lets you see who has what on their plates and who's going to be overwhelmed, right? So let's just say if you have a new project that's getting started and you want to ensure that you assign it to someone who has the capacity to do it, this workload management report gives you that visibility across every team member that you work with across all of your projects, and you could drill down as needed. And then not only that, as you use Protomatrix more, you can actually create what's called effort. So you can say that, this task will take you half a day or 4 hours or whatever, and then you can actually go and review their work based on the number of effort hours or schedule hours that's on their plate. So you can't expect someone to do 60 hours worth of work in 40 hours. And therefore, when you go to a view like this, you can actually shift them around as needed. Okay, so in a nutshell, this at a high level is how I recommend that you approach Protomatrix. Okay, so make sure that if you use Protomatrix on a personal level, again, make sure you have that personal priorities. And if you manage other team members, even if you don't want them in Protomatrix or don't need them in Protomatrix yet, create that project called team priorities and just project that onto the screen whenever you have the meeting with your team members. And then actually, if you work with external clients and you want to ensure that you and your external clients are on the same page, it's the exact same exercise. It's all around putting it down into something tangible. And a list just doesn't cut it. I'm sure so many people have used lists before. What happens with the list is, where do you start? At the top or at the bottom? So by using Protomatrix, using the quadrants, it's so clear what the priorities are, and so clear when you have discrepancies and disagreements that you can focus on that disagreement. So don't be afraid to create those projects. Make sure that you create whatever is needed. One last thing I'm going to show you is actually our integrations with emails, mostly because all of us struggle with email management. Protomatrix is one of the best email prioritization systems. So if you happen to use Outlook, for example, you can install our Protomatrix for Outlook. So if you go to apps here, you click add apps and search for Protomatrix, turn email into task. So when you get an email in Outlook, instead of just flagging it as unread or hoping that you'll remember to get back to it, you can actually click on our app and then choose prioritize email, able to take any email and create a task in Protomatrix from that email. And then what's powerful about this too is that you're able to go and take that email and put it in the appropriate projects and assign to the appropriate people. Let me see here. Oops. See if that opens up. It's loading. Oh, no, I clicked a little too fast. And usually it's much faster than that, so I was trying to be impatient here because that's what I tend to do. So go and try one more time here. And so now there you go. What happens is I take an email, I can actually convert that into a task. I can actually choose the quadrant it goes in. I can choose the project it goes in. And then I can set a due date, and then I can assign it to another person as needed. It's a very, very powerful way to ensure that my most important emails are not forgotten. And so, as I mentioned earlier, setting a due date to something and setting a reminder to something is a way to trick our brain to ensure that we don't lose track of that. So for me, there are emails where I can't respond to at this moment in time, and I need to respond to within a week or 2 weeks or something like that. I can't just flag it because then I have so many flag emails already. So I would go into Matrix and set this. Another cool thing you can do with Matrix is get your inbox address. So what that means is that if you go back to Matrix here, click on inbox, all of you have what's called the secret inbox address. So what that means is that you can click on the secret inbox, get that email address, and now when you have an email, and you can actually just click forward, and then you can actually forward to inbox address, and you're able to create a task in Matrix just by forwarding the email. But here's the useful part, which is I can actually type due tomorrow, remind me daily, and Matrix will interpret those as commands to make sure that I set the due dates and set the reminders for these emails. I use this all the time when I'm on my mobile device. And so I happen to use an iPhone and I use Apple Mail. I don't have an Outlook extension for that. But if I get an important email, I would click forward and then I'll set the due dates and the reminders. And now I know that I'll remember to actually access and open up that email and respond to it as needed. Very, very useful way to ensure that we work on the right things. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go back to my presentation real quick here. So let's wrap things up. Now it's up to you. Sign up for Matrix if you haven't already. If you use Teams, Outlook, make sure that you install our applications for Teams and Outlook. So we probably have one of the best Teams integrations as well. What that means is that we actually allow you to send tasks back and forth. And then within Outlook, you can actually open Matrix within Outlook too. You don't even have to open our application on the web. But if you happen to use Mac or Windows, you can also install our desktop apps. And so having Matrix everywhere, it's completely ubiquitous, allow you to access everything that you need. At the very least, create 3 projects: the personal priorities, the shared team priorities, and your goals. The reason I emphasize that is because it's so important that you use Matrix successfully. I know that at the end of the day, once you use Matrix well, you'll bring it to your team, and then you'll bring it to your organization, but it all starts with you. So I can't emphasize that enough, that when you use it to set your personal goals, if you do nothing else, just putting things down in a tangible form will be so powerful and so helpful to your mentality. When you create tasks in Matrix, make sure that the most important tasks all have due dates and reminders, and then make sure you put in the appropriate quadrants, and feel free to customize the quadrants in a way that makes sense to you. And then lastly, ruthlessly prioritize. We just have too many things on our plate. I have 300 plus projects. I have more than 10,000 items. With Matrix, I'm actually not that overwhelmed. The vast majority of those items are sort of in the back burner, but I'm able to take them out, put them down, and then essentially don't have to think about them until I need to find them or something like that. And then I can actually just focus on those star tasks in those star projects. What success with Matrix should look like? On a personal level, you should be checking Matrix every week, at least, to remind yourself of your goals. That's the most powerful way to ensure that you work on all those important things. And then as you use Matrix more, it should become the one central place to track your priorities. Now, we integrate with a lot of other tools as well that are a way to track tasks and all that. But if you use Matrix correctly, it can meet the needs of every task management. It has all the task management and project management features that you can possibly want. So Matrix will become that central place. At the team level, everyone becomes aligned on the key task. And so I can't emphasize enough how powerful it is that when you just project Matrix on the big screen during your team meeting, how much more aligned your team members will be. Because all these things that we take for granted, we think everyone's on the same page. We're not. So therefore, when you project it on the screen, you're able to see and communicate to others what the priorities are, and then talk about the things where you disagree. And then, of course, if you have important emails, don't just forward it to a coworker. Create a task in Party Matrix, put in the appropriate quadrants, put in the appropriate reminders and due dates, and then assign them to the right people. So then you have one central place to have a conversation around that email. So you're not talking about that emails in an email thread. Instead, you're having that communication within the Party Matrix chat. Okay, with that, I finished my presentation and demo. I'd be happy to field any questions that you have. You can send them in the chat. You can also send me an email to hi@affluence.com, and I'd be happy to talk about your specific use cases and how you can best leverage Party Matrix.